Good morning, everyone. My name is Teresa Buczkowska, and I'm the Integration Manager at the Immigrant Council of Ireland. Before we start the session, I would like to make a short statement. We were made aware that unfortunately, after the sessions yesterday during our conference, some of the speakers were targeted by racist harassment, and online hate. We would like to express solidarity with all the speakers. Unfortunately, this phenomenon is not new. We know well from our own experience that people who speak against injustice, against racism, people who speak for equality, for human rights and migrants' rights, often suffer online harassment, hate, and threats. This is not acceptable. Ireland is better than that. Ireland is a land of 100,000 welcomes, where equality, respect, and inclusion are the guiding values of the life of our communities. We express solidarity with all the speakers and commend their courage for continuing to speak against injustice. We will block, mute, and report everyone who will be engaging in harassing and hateful activity on our social media. If there is anything else that we can do to support our speakers, please let us know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teresa. You are all very welcome to the second day of the Integration Conference by the Immigrant Council of Ireland. I'm very privileged to moderate this panel and to be part of this conference, as well as being part of change, the kind of change that we would like to see in our society. My name is Mariaam Bhatti. I'm a community worker and a social policy practitioner. I have 10 years of working in the social justice sector. I also recently became a member of the expert group for the European Commission on Migration, Integration, and Asylum. I am also in the advisory council of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. As you can imagine, without civil society, a lot of things wouldn't have happened, or they wouldn't happen. Take, for example, in Ireland, we're privileged to have marriage equality in 2015. When you look at even back in 2011, when we had the reversal of the minimum wage, this shows that we do need civil society to point out the shortcomings of policies and their impact. And of course, this is not to say our elected representatives haven't initiated things before or seen them through. It just means that they can't know anything. They can't know everything about, about everything. So sometimes they do need these kind of spaces for us to come together and, and point out, things that they can do better, or inaction, or the results of that. And I would also like to say, always remember that we can always advocate for each other or for others in cases where they are not able to advocate for themselves. And advocacy comes from various places. It can come from behind the counter of a hospital, or it can come from, a bus driver. It can come from, unexpected places. So thank you very much, Teresa, Valeria, Robert, and the rest of the Immigrant Council for putting together this conference. It is really important. We all need to take part in the, in any action for the cohesion of our society. And thank you all the viewers who made yourselves available today for this conference. I look forward to hearing how, the importance of collecting data, for example, and the integration officers that work on victim support, on allyship. I also look forward to hearing how, the guards respond to these issues. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce to you our first speaker. And this is Valeria Aquino, the Integration Officer at the Immigrant Council. Valeria holds a Bachelor of Social Work from Pontifical Catholic University of Campinas and has over 19 years experience of working for social change in initiatives and organizations in the private sector, as well as the public in Brazil and in Ireland. She's currently the Integration Officer for the Immigrant Council at the Anti-Racism Support Service, supporting victims of racism and discrimination since 2018. She's also part of the program Diversity is Good for Business, which works towards a more diverse workplace, as the Executive Director of the AMBI, the Association of Brazilian Families in Ireland, and integration of Brazilian nationals in Ireland since 2010. Valeria, can I give you the floor, please?
Oh, thank you very much, Mariam. Yeah, it's sad that we started with exactly talking about racism. That unfortunately happened yesterday with the other speakers in the conference. As you mentioned, I am an integration officer at the Immigrant Council of Ireland. I am originally from Brazil. I arrived in Ireland in 2012, and I'm working at the Immigrant Council since 2018. And since 2018, I am responsible for the Anti-Racism Support Service. So I've been talking to victims of racism and discrimination in almost like every single day. The Anti-Racism Support Service, it was launched in 2011, actually. It was a response to the findings of the research taking racism seriously, which identify the lack of support services to victims of racism and discrimination back in 2011. And so the service was created to fill that gap. So like how the Anti-Racist Support Service works, like the victims, they can contact us by email or through our phones, or they can go to our webpage and fill a very short form. And so we will contact them back and we will give them support, one-on-one support. We would guide them through how to report racism. We will refer them to other services if it's necessary, like for psychological support, for legal advice. And so we will make sure that they are comfortable on bringing their report and their case forward. So we are there to make this connection. This is our 10th year working in these services, and we supported almost like 900 clients through this year. Like it is a big number, I think, and thinking on how much we still suffer with underreporting, like it just made me think like how many other victims it's out there that could not reach to the service or decided not to report. So we are trying to really work on towards to make the service available to everybody and say to people that we are there to support if they need some kind of assistance or information, and on a more personal level, we're going to be there to talk to them. We also have, we run the campaign a year ago called How to Be an Ally Against Racism as well. The How to Be an Ally Against Racism, it is 4 steps on how you as an outsider, as a person, a witness of racism, how you can support the victim. So you can find this material in our webpage as well. It's very simple. It's very conscious on safety as well. So when we talk about people stepping up and supporting victims, we always need to be careful on to make them safe enough to do so, and also to support the victims as much as they can. Of course, like since in 2011, with the Taking Racism Seriously report, we defined and pointed a lot of other gaps that we are still working on filling. So, for example, like we still are lacking in Ireland in a more coordinated system to support victims. So like we have a lot of organizations offering support to victims, but we don't connect with each other, and sometimes we don't know what for sure we are doing and in which level we can support victims. So this is still something that we need to work towards to to build this support system for the victims, and also to create this relationship between services so we can also support the victims in a way that it's not like, I don't know, it's very hard for a victim. You keep sending them to different places. And so the victim has to tell the story every single time, and every single door that they knock, it is the same thing, tell the same story, which it is very complicated because it's a very traumatic event. So maybe if we try to coordinate this, it will make easier for the victims to navigate to the support system that we have available here in Ireland. Also, one of the gaps that has to be filled is about the psychological support to victims. We do have organizations working on supporting mental health issues, but we need to find services that are working specifically with victims of racism and discrimination. That I think it's very important, like especially, for example, for me as a migrant, that my first language is not English. It is very challenging for me to go to a psychologist and try to express myself and try to find a ways to communicate on how I feel in a language that is not my mother tongue. So like we need to be able as well to work together to offer the best as we can service psychological support to these victims. And also one point that it's more and more coming up on our helpline is the lack of legal representation. What I can see, for example, like when a victim goes to and places the report to the workplace relations, for example, when they go for the hearing, like the company, they always have lawyers to go to represent the companies, but the victims, they are always by themselves. And so like this, it is a huge lack, and it stops victims from coming forward, and it stops victims from reporting because they don't feel like they can protect their rights at the same level as the companies are doing. And like I had one client, for example, that he showed up for the session with the workplace relations, and he was by himself, and the company has someone from the HR and another 2 lawyers. So it was 3 against 1 victim to talk about the issue, about what he was there to expose. So it's not a fair game there for victims. So we are really trying to work towards find ways to fill that gap as well. And so, and what we are doing now, looking for the future and also trying to improve the services and improve the support to victims, we are now working on creating a national support network that will have the aim to really connect everybody that it's offering support to victims, like one-to-one support, really individual support to victims in Ireland, to come together. And also like, so we know what we are doing, so we can pass this information to our communities, and they can be aware that when they are victims, they have all the services available for them. We are also almost finishing now a protocol on how to support victims. The intention is to be very simple, very easy to use. And so everybody that has an interest at school, every organization that have interest on knowing a little bit more how to support these victims and how to connect them with the services if you don't feel comfortable yourself to support. We are finishing this protocol very soon. We are also, of course, on creating this protocol, we are starting to contact potential network members, providing, for example, psychological or legal representation for victims at low cost or free. And so we can also pass this information to the victims and pass this information to our community. And so I think that's me, like.
Thank you so much, Valeria, for your contribution. It's a lot to hear about and to think about when you think of the time since 2011. Just wondering, day in, day out, every year, what it's like to have to deal with that, and how frustrating perhaps it must be to not see any legislation in place, especially when you hear of these issues day in, day out. I will come back to you after I have given other panelists an opportunity to respond. Thank you so much for now, Valeria. I'll come back to you later. Up next, I'm going to move to Sergeant Geraldine Greene, who works for the Garda National Diversity and Integration Unity since 2019, and she has 28 years experience of working in and Garda Síochána, and 13 years operational experience working in Pier Street. I happen to have worked in Pier Street as a youth worker myself during my university years, and it was always heartwarming to see the work that the community guards would do, and how the young people that would have otherwise ended up on the other side of the law finding support with the guards. Your previous experience, Geraldine, has been working on crime mapping, performance management, organization development, policy planning, change management, strategic planning. Would you please just give us an idea on, the kind of support or the kind of issues that you work on this issue on victim support? The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mariaam. Yeah, thank you, everybody, and thank you for the invite from the Immigrant Council of Ireland to speak to you all today. As Mariaam said, my name is Geraldine Greene. I'm a sergeant in the Diversity and Integration Unit, and we are part of a larger community engagement bureau. We're a very small unit, but with a huge remit. So our biggest responsibility is building relationships both within Garda Síochána and externally in the community in terms of providing a service and a better service to victims. That's victims of racism we're focusing on today, and the bigger part, which is hate crime, and focusing on victims of hate crime. So I'll just get into what we're doing. Diversity in policing is not just about working with diverse and minority groups. It's about recognizing and understanding the differences that exist in those groups and responding to those needs, whether they're based on race, religion, gender, whatever the case may be. And though our unit is not an investigative unit, we do deal with third-party referrals. We act as a liaison with victims, with the investigators and other support services, and we try to provide assurance to wider communities when there is an incident of racism. We face daily challenges, obviously, with policing a very diverse and more multicultural society. And now more than ever, especially during COVID, we need to be able to understand those needs of our diverse and minority communities. And by the very nature of those communities, they're often hard to reach and more susceptible to racism and other types of hate crime, which makes them especially vulnerable. And being a victim from a diverse and minority community can bring about other layers of fear, mistrust of the police, maybe in a country of origin, and also mistrust of the Gardaí, I have to say. Also re-victimization, and the likelihood of reporting a crime is often lessened in these cases. So it's well known, and as Valeria spoke, there is an underreporting of racism and of hate crime in general. And this is something that we're working on constantly in our small unit to change. So we're at the forefront of bringing about a lot of change, and even without hate crime legislation, and we do know that the department is working on that, and hopefully we will see that very soon. There's a number of things that we've been doing as a unit, and I'll go through those, and later on, obviously, if there's questions, you can come back to me. So the first thing was in 2019, we introduced our diversity and integration strategy for 2019 to 2021, and we published that in 14 different languages. And the strategy contains a definition for hate crime, and that's the first time Garda Síochána has actually formalized a definition for hate crime, and it also includes a definition for non-crime hate incidents. And I'll speak about that more in a second. So we've also developed then to support that hate crime policy and procedures, and that's to support our training and to support the strategy. We also carried out a full review of all our Garda diversity officers throughout the country, and we looked at their training needs. We looked at their geographical spread throughout the country. We're glad to say now we have 281 Garda diversity officers in place throughout the country, and they're supported by a diversity inspector in every division in the country. So they're available to deal with these type of incidents, and I will let you know there's going to be a revised list published on the Garda website that will give you the names of all these officers and where they're stationed, and also contact numbers. We are also have reviewed our entire diversity and our hate crime training, and we have a full new diversity and hate crime training online, which is about to be rolled out in the next few months, in the next month, I should say. And the first people that will be trained will be our Garda diversity officers to make sure that they're fully equipped with dealing with minority communities. And I'm glad to say as well that our training includes video submissions from all our diverse groups, every single one of them, where they have given their personal experiences of racism, of homophobia, of anti-Semitism. And that kind of information is very useful for us to get that a personal account and to get a better understanding and have more empathy and have a much better understanding of what those experiences are, and then to respond correctly. We've also made huge changes to our Pulse system, and that's our crime recording system. And those changes were carried out in October of last year, and they include, I'll just run briefly through what those changes are. It now allows for the formal recording of non-crime incidents, and these are incidents that don't meet the threshold of a criminal offence. And heretofore, people may not have thought that whatever happened to them wasn't important enough to report to the guards. And we're here to tell you, yes, it is. If it's important to you, it's important to us. And we work off a very low threshold of perception. And that is in that if it's perceived by either you, a victim, a family member, a friend, somebody else acting in your best interest, if you perceive that you have been a victim of racism, that is sufficient for An Garda Síochána to take that report from you. And we're obliged to do that. The issue of investigation and prosecution is a different matter. And obviously we would need further evidence to gather for that. But to take a report, we are obliged to do that. All we need is your perception. There's also a mandatory hate tick box on all Pulse incidents now. And that then triggers the selection of one of the 9 discriminatory motives which are included in our hate crime definition. So it allows for much better recording, much accurate recording of your account of what has happened. And it ensures that it's flagged correctly with a H identifier. So that allows for much better analysis of this kind of crime. It allows us to look at trends, repeat victimization, and repeat offending. Another thing that we have introduced with that is, like I said, the non-hate crime incidents being recorded. And that's one of the biggest advances that we have made with the Pulse system, is that it allows that formalized recording. We also then established a diversity forum, a national diversity forum, and Valeria and Teresa are part of that, I'm glad to say, and also Einar. And they are there to oversee the implementation of our diversity strategy and make sure we're doing what we've said we're going to do, that we're not paying lip service, that this is a working document. It's something that we take very seriously, and we welcome the oversight and the monitoring. The next thing is I touched on our diversity officers, And the role of our diversity officers are hugely important in the community, in that they receive extra support from us, extra training in building those relationships with diverse and minority groups and being that link in the community, whether it's a link to other services, a link into us, or whatever that may be. And we would welcome you to get to know your diversity officers, and we will make sure that those lists are published on the website. Like I said, we've 281 of them around the country. Also, some really good news, and I heard you mentioning there about, you know, the accessibility of reporting. We have an online hate crime reporting developed and fully finished and ready to be launched. And we're going to launch that in March when we have our Hate Crime Awareness Week. And that's going to coincide with the 21st of March, which is the Elimination of Racial Discrimination Day. And we're going to run that campaign where we're going to have a press conference. We're going to have a segment on Crime Call, and we're going to have members from our diverse and minority communities doing interviews with us. And that's all going to be part of a campaign in the middle of March. So I'm really glad to announce that. We're also working with our HR counterparts to encourage recruitment from diverse and minority groups, because this is the way we see to encourage people to report to us if there's more representation in An Garda Síochána, and currently there is not. So we need to do better in that area. So we're working hard on that. We also carry out induction days in direct provision centres. And recently we've done a lot of work with the International Organization for Migration and the Department of Justice in doing orientation presentations for Syrian refugees. So just some practical tips then in relation to reporting racism, and maybe to touch on some of the things that Valeria mentioned. Always report racism to An Garda Síochána. If it might seem unimportant or trivial to you or not, that it won't be taken seriously. If it matters to you, like I said, it will matter to us, and your perception is what matters. Sharing on social media is useful in terms of awareness and spreading the message, but it doesn't alert us officially. We may see it when we're monitoring social media, but it needs to be reported to us. When you're reporting, bring a friend or a family member with you, and somebody that you're comfortable with. Bring them with you to a Garda station. Ask for privacy. If that's not possible, reschedule an appointment to come back. Ask to speak to a Garda diversity officer. And I think it's a good idea if, like I'm saying, when you have the names of these people, that maybe you make an appointment in advance and come to a Garda station with that appointment. Ask to have a translator. And that's something that we will do for you. Again, if it's a pre-planned arrangement, that can be done much easier. You can also then use a third-party referrer, such as the Immigrant Council or INAR or any other agency, to report to us. We now have third-party referring in place. You will be able to use our online reporting from next month, and that will be available through the Garda website. And don't accept less than you deserve. Ask to speak to the sergeant in charge or a supervisor if you do not feel you have received the service that you deserve. If you're not happy, you're entitled to then make a complaint. You can do that to a superintendent or to GSOC. When you come into a station, bring any written records you have with you or any other online records of, say, harassment or online abuse that you may have experienced. Bring that with you. The more information you can give us, the better it is for us. Make sure you get the name and the ID number of the guard that you're dealing with. And often if you forget the name, the shoulder number here is always identifiable just to us. And if there's a pulse incident, ask for the pulse incident number as a reference. And when you're reporting, remember, we're human too. We often make mistakes. So you might have to be very clear with us about what you're explaining, and maybe have to explain in more detail. And lastly, you can contact us at the Garda Diversity and Integration Unit at diversity@garda.ie, or you can visit our webpage on the Garda website. And to finish, my message today is racism and all forms of hate crime is unacceptable to An Garda Síochána, and we want you to report to us and we will engage with you in a professional and sensitive and compassionate manner. Racism and all other hate crimes, we will thoroughly investigate them, and you will be supported throughout the criminal justice process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sergeant Greene. That was very, very helpful. It's really exciting to hear that there's a lot of things coming up, thinking of things like, looking at policing with an intercultural lens, the revised list of, of what will be happening in future in terms of reporting, in terms of the diversity officers. It would be great to know who's, who to go to when we have these issues, but also like understanding what the role of the diversity officers, as you've said, as well as online crime reporting. I think that's something that during COVID, a lot of us have noticed that, of course, there isn't so many opportunities now to meet people on the streets at the moment. So it might feel like racism on the street kind of racism is down, but it means online, a lot of people know that this is something they experience a number of times a day. So it's such welcome initiatives coming up. I'll be coming back to you again if there are any questions. Thank you so much for your contribution. To everyone who is watching this, please do use the question and answers box if you can. I heard that yesterday some people were trying to raise hands, and we encourage you to use the question and answer box if you can, and send your questions. But I just also want to highlight that for those that are on Twitter, you can use the hashtag INIC 2021, which is the integration conference hashtag for this year. I'm going to move on to Claudia Kisha, who is working with the Irish Network Against Racism, and particularly on reporting on iReport. That some people have used, just like Sergeant Greene talked about, mechanisms that are in place for people to be able to report that I didn't even know existed. But let's hear more from Claudia about, how we go about this and how far it does help us combat racism. So Claudia Kisha is a board member of the Irish Network Against Racism. She's a speaker, creative, and diversity and inclusion professional specializing in anti-racism. Her background is in the arts and international relations, and she's passionate about curating and holding safe spaces for conversation, learning, and cultural change to take place with a view to building a fairer, equitable, and more empathetic society, something that we need. She has also been involved in various projects at state and community level, highlighting the issues faced by migrants in Ireland for example, accessing employment, discrimination with particular focus on racism. She has also played part in initiatives that dispel myths and stereotypes and promote and advance the progress of migrants in Irish society. Claudia sits on the board of the Irish Network Against Racism, which is focused on helping organizations and institutions address racism in Ireland. Claudia, you have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, and apologies for my video being off. I think I'm having some connection issues. So also alert me if you can't hear me, because I'm conscious that on a call yesterday, my connection was very poor. Okay, so thank you very much for the invitation to the Immigrant Council, and it has already been really insightful listening to both Valeria and Geraldine. And actually something Geraldine has said has really stuck with me, and I think I just want to repeat it to reiterate the point for everybody listening. If it's important to you, it's important. And I think, well, I think Geraldine said, if it's important to you, it's important to the guards. And I think I just want to just let that kind of sink in with everybody. If it's important to you, it is important enough to report. Because one of the things that we hear about a lot is
that sense of self-doubt that victims go through. You know, am I causing a fuss? Actually, somebody said this to me only last week. Am I reading wrong into this? You know, have I taken this person up wrong, or have I interpreted this incident wrong? And, you know, so that self-doubt comes into your mind as somebody who experiences racism. It does come into your mind, and as much as the incident can be upsetting and difficult and limiting to your daily life, that doubt is never far away. And so I think it's really important for people to just remember that. If it's important to you, it's important enough to report. So in terms of INAR, I think reporting racism is, I want to say across the board, is a huge problem in terms of underreporting. It's definitely a problem in Ireland, but it's most certainly a problem across Europe as well. And unfortunately, I think there's something, in my opinion, there's a simple disconnect where people don't understand the value of reporting. So at the risk of sounding very statistical in this answer, you know, reporting allows for that raw data to be brought forward, to be used to do things like lobby the government or make policy changes. You know, it all comes down to that reporting element. And I think if people are not reporting or are reluctant to report or feel they don't know how to report, that feeds into that larger issue we have around policy change and around lobbying and influencing people in our communities to make the change. So it's so vitally important. I can't stress how important it is. From an INAR point of view, we have the iReport platform. It is available as a web page and as an app. And it's a fantastic platform. It's easy to use. We have quite a significant number of reports coming in on a daily basis. We've certainly seen a spike or surge, if you like, in reporting since the beginning. Well, actually, I'll probably say since last year, since the beginning of COVID. A worrying increase actually in the number of reports coming in. And, you know, these kind of looking mainly like, you know, I suppose in two categories. One, an increase in anti-Asian racism, and one, an increase in online hate speech and racism online. Now, obviously, we can speculate. People are at home more, I suppose, and they're at their computers more, or perhaps I'm not sure what the reason is for that increase, but it's certainly a worrying trend that we've seen. I think so. One of the other things I wanted to highlight is the guide to responding to racism that INAR have developed. This was developed so I think it was 2019, if I'm not wrong. And it's a really comprehensive guide. It looks at how to report. It guides organizations and individuals through all the different ways that you can report, not just to the iReport, but to the guards as well. It points people to not just how you can report, but also how you can respond. So I think we heard a little bit earlier on about the importance of responding and supporting victims and people who are affected by racism. So there's a great section in there on where to find support for victims, and this is legal support, emotional support, also specialist advice, which ranges from lots of different things, obviously depending on the type of incident for those affected by racism. We also then have, as Geraldine mentioned, March is Anti-Racism Month. So at INAR, we're actually marking the whole month of March with different activities. And actually, if anybody listening has any activities coming up, you're very welcome to use the hashtag ARM 2021, which is Anti-Racism Month for March, or else hashtag Together Against Racism. And those are just some of the structures, I guess, I wanted to touch on that we have in place, and some of the things coming up, particularly with March for reporting. I think on the other hand, I just wanted to explore a little bit, for everybody listening, and perhaps if people want to join the conversation through the Q&A box, I'd be open to that. The idea of what effective allyship actually looks like when we talk about reporting and responding. And I think I just wanted to highlight the importance of things like bystander intervention, which people often take for granted. I think as somebody who has been on the receiving end of racism, I can tell you, when you're in that situation, when you're in the pub or the Lewis or wherever it happens, and somebody says something or does something racist and nobody around you responds. Now, I'm not suggesting people put themselves in danger, but certainly nobody around you even checks on you afterwards, say, if they can't respond at the time, depending on how aggressive it is. I can tell you what you tell yourself is that everybody must agree. They all must think the same. And regardless of how much you try to rationalize that, maybe they don't, or, afterwards, in that moment, that is what you think and that is what you feel. So intervening as a bystander, if it's safe and possible to do so, is so vitally important when it comes to victim support and when it comes to actually being there for somebody and lessening the impact, I would say, because that's what it does. Having somebody stand up and say something makes the difference between you being able to move on from that incident quicker or that incident having a longer lasting impact on your life. So I think it's so important. And I think in addition to reporting and in addition to, educating yourself about how to respond or how to better support victims of racism, there's something about that onus that we all need to take as individuals. And how can we, in our own spaces, outside of work, how can we, in our neighborhoods, on our road, at the school gates, on the bus, how can we as an individual take responsibility for making Ireland a fairer, equal and safer space to live? Because that's what we're talking about. When we talk about inclusion, when we talk about victim support, the conversation is all about how can we all make Ireland a safer, more inclusive, more harmonious and fairer place to live. The onus is on the individual. I'm not saying all the responsibility is on the individual, but there's an onus that we all have to take. And I think I really wanted to make that point today, because if we look in the last couple of weeks, we have had different social media platforms launch various initiatives to assist or to help people be able to report. So obviously there's a huge focus on reporting, which I think is great. I think it's about time. I think we've seen Facebook launch their video. I think we've seen them try to take more of a responsibility on reporting, try to adjust their community standards. And that's great. It's about time spaces like this started to take responsibility for making online spaces more safe. We've also seen such, the beginning of a movement in the UK, if you like, where, major football clubs are starting to say that they are going to ask the government to impose fines on social media platforms if social media platforms are not taking responsibility for how to handle online hate speech better. So we're seeing things like this happen. We also saw what happened in Ireland in the last couple of weeks in relation to the Ian Wright situation and the young man in Kerry and the result that came out of that case and what what Ian Wright had to say about it. And I guess when I read Ian Wright's statement, all I felt was empathy and agreement. I felt as though if as a society we're not taking these things seriously enough, if we're going to start from an institutional level not naming things for what they are. I think it's a reflection of general society in some ways. And I think that disconnect is really important to try and bridge. You know, I think this young man in Kerry, unfortunately, you know, he didn't just curse at Ian Wright. He didn't just, you know, use foul language towards him. He attacked a core part of his identity. And that's something that many people in Ireland, many people from ethnic minorities have to live with sometimes on a daily basis, that attack on a core part of their identity. And so, you know, hopefully, as the previous speakers have said, we are seeing the government look at developing hate crime legislation, and we're seeing them do this in conjunction with civil society organizations, which is great. Hopefully we have a legislation come out that is robust, that is empathetic, that is fair, you know, that has looked at spaces or similar legislations in different parts of the world and has taken the best bits out of it, and we've learned from, you know, different societies and how they're handling this, and we have something that is truly effective. So yes, I wanted to just finish up with that point. And again, thank you for inviting me, and apologies for my connection. I hope I've been clear enough this morning with the audio, because I know the video is a bit dodgy. Thank you, Mariam.
Thank you so much, Claudia, for that. I think you've raised a really number of important questions and issues. You've highlighted some issues and you've raised a number of questions when you think of you know, things like that fighting racism is everyone's job. It's, you know, whether we are in our everyday at the shop or on the bus or in our neighborhood, that is everyone's work. But we also, of course, do need to see policies or laws responding to this. Just conscious of the time, there are a number of questions that have come in that are very interesting, and I wonder how many of them I can be able to read, so you can. So maybe one of you can pick a question to respond to. There is a specific question on, you know, what does taking a report mean? Is it information gathering, or is it statistic reporting? I think that could be responded to by Valeria or Claudia. But there's another question for Sergeant Greene, which says, "Hi, Geraldine, have you a date for that crime cause section? Would be great to watch or spread the word, and just thanking you for the work you are doing." And then there's another one on a question for you as well, Sergeant Greene, that says, "Will there be a further diversity and integration strategy developed beyond 2021? Is there a consultation process, and how can individuals or organizations participate?" Yeah. So maybe, yeah, as well as when will the diversity officers be available, made to the public? Will there be one in each community? And there's just a number of questions, thanking you for that. And then the other question is, do you have a representative of the African or Irish community African-Irish community in your department? If your answer is no, please can you explain how can we build trust with the lack of representation? I also think I'm going to read one more question, that there's someone who's interested in hearing about the disconnect between the liaison officers and the wider force, and they think this may have had a factor in the shooting of George Gichichi. I think a lot of the questions seems to be coming, it's mostly for Geraldine, but there was questions about reporting, about, you know, is it for information gathering, is it for statistic reporting? So if you're happy to answer those, I will give you the floor, please.
Sure, that's a lot of questions. Thank you, Mariam. Well, firstly, in relation to the information gathering, we need the information to respond. We need the information to see trends. We need the information to see who's been victimized, if it's particular communities. It's important. It might sound cold, but statistics are important. And like Claudia said, for lobbying government, lots of different reasons. But for us, it's for, providing the right response to the right people in the right places. And that's why we need the information. In relation to the crime call, I just got an email in when the last speaker was talking to say the 31st of March is the crime call segment, and our slot, I'm waiting for it to be confirmed, but that's the date provisionally anyway at the moment, is the 31st of March. So look out for that, and that should sort of be an end to a really good week of lots of different publicity and lots of different events. In relation to the diversity officers, we do have them in every division in the country, and there's 28 divisions. Currently the country is being how would I say it? It's been reorganized into bigger divisions, and there's going to be 19 divisions, but at the moment some divisions have more than other divisions, but for now within every division in the country we do have representation of diversity officers. With the training that's coming online, we will have more of them, and we will have more of them trained. So we're addressing that constantly, and where we see gaps, we're addressing that within our office. I can't comment on anything in relation to George's shooting, or I'm afraid I can't talk about that. In relation to the engagement with the community, we have ongoing engagement with every community. Liaison officers, as they were called, that question that came in there, that isn't something that has dropped off. Liaison within the communities, that is something that we're constantly enhancing, and especially now with the new training that's coming on board. With the review we did, we had liaison officers that we had on our books, let's say in name only, that had moved on or had been transferred or whatever, and when we did a realistic review a couple of months ago, and we can now say that those 281, we will have them highly trained, and they will be receiving, like I said, the first lot of training will be given to those officers. And was there another question there, Mariaam, that I've missed?
I think you have them all covered. The integration strategy, perhaps?
Oh, the strategy, I beg your pardon. Yes, absolutely, there will be another strategy. And the next strategy will combine both the external and the internal. So at the moment we have our diversity and integration strategy. There's also a diversity and inclusion strategy, which is from our HR side, which will include issues such as recruitment, retention, representation levels. So at the moment, they are two separate strategies. That internal strategy was deliberately developed for a 1-year period. So it would coincide with the end of ours at the end of 2021. And then afterwards, we will have a combined strategy going forward from there on. So there was a reason that was a short strategy. And like the previous strategy, and maybe a lot of people that are online were involved in the consultation process, we will be doing that again. We'll have a number of consultation days around the country, maybe by Zoom, I don't know. But at the moment it probably will be. And we will do that in a number of different geographical locations, let's say. And input is always welcome, and that's how we build our strategy. So we'll be doing that in exactly the same way as we did for the last one.
Thank you very much for your responses, Sajjan.
Can I answer the first question, Mary?
Yeah, sure, of course.
About the report. Yeah. The first question was, what does taking a report mean? I can say, like, for the anti-racist support service, like when we take a report, when you report to us, you decide how you want this report to be, like which kind of support do you want. Like some victims would contact us and they want just to talk to someone. They want someone to listen because they are upset. Like sometimes I stay like over an hour with a client because they just are so upset. They want to talk. They want to talk to someone. Or they want some information on how to report, or they just want to send us an email to let us know that is happening. And so like we go, you decide like how it's the support that you need. And like we don't make any discrimination on which person we support, like everybody that goes to our helpline, they are listened to, they are respected, and we support them as much as we can. So it is like, it's pretty much up to you, like which kind of support do you need. So be free, open, and comfortable on contacting us.
Thank you, Valeria. I suppose it would be important to share at the end of the day the lines that people can use for reporting, or the contact address. I think that's very important. Also for people that are wondering about at the end of this, where does that data go, or what does it do? I do imagine that it's very important for things like policy advocacy, obviously, to show that something is happening, because you could not mitigate against something that you can't even measure. You don't even know how much of it is happening out there. So I think that this is very important. Just before handing over to Teresa, I think the Immigrant Council, I just want to thank you all very much for your time, for having taken your Monday morning to come in and be part of this. Fighting racism, as you can see from what you've shared earlier on, is very important from an individual point of view, from a community or societal point of view, from a national point of view, and all the resources as well as initiatives we can use to fight against racism is just very, very important. I do not think, based on time, I have any more things to say, but I think I'll give this briefly to Teresa on closing remarks, please.
Thank you very much, Mariam, Claudia, Geraldine, and Valeria, for your time and for the insightful information. For people looking for more information, what kind of services either Ireland or Immigrant Council is providing to victims of racism, please visit our website. There you can find all the information about victim support, about how to be an ally, and so on. Our next session will start in an hour at 12 noon. It will be on direct provision system. We welcome you all. And meantime, thank you very much and goodbye.